Good morning and welcome to GM Tips. This is GM Rick here. I'm using my new camera. As you can tell, I'm a little clearer than the USB camera, and that it works a little bit better. So you'll probably hear better volume, which I hope you guys appreciate. I'm sorry that earlier ones haven't been on that. You can hear Mini GM in the back trying to compete with Dee Dee. She always does, singing Rio. Today's GM Tips is going to be on the topic of the dramatic question. Now, some of you are going to ask, what is the dramatic question? And it's a really good thing, and I'm gonna give 100% props to where the dramatic question came from, because we all build it. But I think the guy that really defined it well in his video yesterday on Sunday was EvilSqueeGee, and I draw a lot on EvilSqueeGee, so make sure you tune into his Twitch casts on Sunday morning around 9 o'clock. Look up Evil, and it's SQUEEGEE, and make sure you're getting the prop time in there with the EvilSqueeGee on that. So a lot of times with our campaigns, we're trying to design things to have a draw for our players, and really the thing that's going to help them a lot is the dramatic question. Now you're going to ask me, what's the dramatic question? Well, it's basically, can the PCs use X plot device to do whatever they have to do before some kind of consequence or failure? And again, this structure is a really strong structure because what it does is it answers several things that will really build a story. You're trying to say, what is the real core or the real crux of why all these players are going to do something? So you can build a lot of examples using this type of method. And one of the things that was suggested on the cast was using a matrix with different things that randomly generates the parts of that question for you to throw at the players. Now, what's a plot device? Plot device can be a lot of different things. It can be a non-player character that runs into the party and has some sort of influence on them. It can be an object or a literal device. So say like a scroll, an ancient scroll that opens gates. It could be a shrine to an evil deity. It could be a shrine to a good deity. It could be a thermonuclear device that's going to go off and detonate and destroy your space system. Because it's going to cause a chain effect reaction. It's going to be shot at a sun and cause a chain reaction. Basically, it is something like maybe an army or a community or a Congress of voting people that are together, so United Space Congress, that maybe there's an influence over them that's going to cause issues. Maybe it's control over a special place, so maybe a data bank or a sacred ritual site or a burial site, something along those lines. Basically, you're going to use the plot device as the thing that's going to really pull the characters into the dramatic question. It becomes the core device that everything centers around. So we have that portion of it. Let's look at the next portion. The next portion is to do basically the thing. So what do they have to do with the plot device? Give you an example. So say you got an evil shrine. The players must desecrate the evil shrine or sanctify the evil shrine. What they have to do. Or the shrine will release Demogorgon onto the world. Or the shrine will release a Cthulhu-esque deity onto the world. So it can be for any kind of horror campaign. Or the wormhole will release an alien horde that will destroy the universe if the players don't close it. So you can put together, and what you want to do ahead of time is you really want to brainstorm some ideas. So sit down, maybe do a couple ideas on a matrix where you sit down and do these different elements. So the different elements, again, so you guys know, can the PCs use, and the list will be of plot devices, to action. They're going to do something before a consequence occurs. So you're building your campaign together to do this. And so look at your campaign, look at the different things and aspects of your campaign, and say, what would draw my players? And especially knowing what they want to play. Because ahead of times, the players will a lot of times discuss with you something that they're really itching to play. So try to design it around using those abilities of whatever they want to play. And I'm sorry for the mini GM commentary. She's just having fun with Ice Age in the background. So you guys have to tolerate a little bit of the mini GM there. Being the dad working from home as a regional sales guy. So let's take a look at the next part of it, which is the critical path. And basically the critical path is a collection of events which must occur and subdramatic questions that must be answered yes for the overarching dramatic questions answer to be able to be yes. So you got to get a yes situation. So what are these things that have to be answered for the players? Well, some of the things that are most critical in the critical path is the players, first of all, must learn about the thing that must be done, or the plot device. They have to learn about that. If there's no easy path to them learning about that, so say they have to go to a library to do some research for some sort of professor that is interested in this evil shrine. And so they're going to go learn about shrines, maybe. And then they find out about the shrine, the one that's going to cause the major problem. The PCs must locate and achieve some sort of contact with the plot device. The players must go do their action. They must journey forth to get to that plot device. Otherwise, if they don't come in contact with it, it's really going to be tough to drive that campaign. Next is the players must use the plot device. Now, using the plot device means that they're going to have to do something with it in order for it to be a viable thing in the whole overarching dramatic question. Now, there's always questions that you want to ask on these things. You know, you got to learn the what, where, and when to the thing that must be done. You must arrive at the place and skill level and time of the thing to be done. And then the PCs must actually do the thing that must be done. So these are all parts of this. And again, there's always questions like what, where, when, why that you can ask. And the players have to ask themselves in order to get to sometimes these overall arching questions. Now, we talked a little bit, and Squeegee talked a little bit yesterday about railroad. Do you railroad the players? And no, not necessarily. But what you're going to do is you're going to set them on a path of events that's going to kind of take them on a journey. And they're going to come off sometimes the rails. Train derails every once in a while. So what do you got to do? You've got to enter in things that allow them a little bit of leeway off the rails, but coming back on. If you've ever seen the show The Polar Express, love that movie for a movie time show. It's kind of a funny little Tom Hanks one. But you see the Polar Express go off the tracks on the frozen lake. And it goes way off the tracks. So what does the conductor have to do? He has to get it back on the tracks. So they're sliding this way, they're sliding that way, they go backwards, but then they turn around and get right back on those tracks again. Why? Because the lake is going to crack and fall through if they don't. And they're all going to drown in the icy waters. So, all that said, what you're trying to do is make sure the players understand that there's icy waters under them, and that those tracks guide them to the right place they want to go on that dramatic question. However, they get off track a little bit, that's fine. Let them go off the rails a little bit, but emphasize the urgency sometimes of getting back on the tracks. You don't necessarily want to railroad them, you're guiding them. Gentle nudges, but let it always be their idea. That's one of the greatest things in GMing. You always have to let the players think it is their idea, not yours. Because when they think it's yours, then they're going to become very resistant to you as a GM. Do not push your players. Do not prod your players. Do not pull your players. What you do is set in little things that guide them along the path. It can be a swerving path, but it's a path. Sorry about that. Phone call comes in. Work always calls. So we were talking about the what's and whys and how questions, and I think those are very important because if you don't have the what's, whys, and hows, you're not going to draw your players in. And yes, I'm looking down at some notes. Squeegee did some documentation, and so I took some screenshots of it, so I had it. But again, the biggest thing is don't railroad. Bring in questions and get them asking questions that really make sense. And that's sometimes hard because in an action-oriented party, you have to present it in such a way that they're going to want to ask the questions. Sometimes you get the players that are like, hey, let's go from A to B and crush C. And so keep in mind your players. You may get this wonderful thing all plotted out that tries to draw them in, and they may not be question-oriented people. So be very careful in that. You want to make sure that you're really rounding things towards what your players' strengths are and help bolster up their weaknesses. And that's another concept to throw in there. And I know Squeegee doesn't always go into a lot of that. He goes into what motivates the players. But sometimes I think you got to look at as a GM yourself, what is your players' composition? Who are they? How do they think? If you've been playing with them for a while, you will know how they think. And you really have to design your ideas and what I'm giving you here towards how they think and reason. And that takes a lot sometimes as a GM to sit there and figure that out. You have to brainstorm it a little bit yourself. But with newer players, you can try this path. It's very straightforward. The one thing I love that he threw in there, and this is kind of a thing like you've heard of Schrodinger's cat, he threw in there Schrodinger's gun. And it's the golden law of GMing, basically, Squeegee puts out there. And I'm just going to read it verbatim for what he put down, so that way you guys can hear a little bit of his thinking in it. If you haven't shown the PC something by declaring that something is the way it is, it doesn't have to be that way yet. The GM is free to change things up behind the scene in any way he wants to, and the players will never notice the difference. Clever and subtle applications of Schrodinger's gun will spare the entire campaign from being ruined by an unexpected PC action, while still letting the PC do what they want to do. Poor application of Schrodinger's gun will clearly and obviously ruin everybody's fun and negate your players' choices, rather than reward them without destroying your game or story. Use it wisely. Use Schrodinger's gun to shoot railroading down, not defend it. So Schrodinger's gun keeps you from railroading players. It allows you to modify the plot where it makes sense to guide the players the way they want to go, and yet don't lose the overall guiding question. And so that's the thing you got to do as a GM. It's what I was talking about. He just puts it in a better way, and that's really at the end of the day what it is. Railroading, we joke about it, but it happens, and GMs do it, and some of you will do it. A GM's job is not to railroad. It is to design a story, a plot, a compelling question that really draws the players' interest, but it's bigger than interest. And I'm using that word, commitment. That's the word I'm looking for. Draws the player's commitment to that overlying question, to reach that before that effect comes into play. And so you really got to look at how to do that. And you can do that by, and I hit this a lot because I think it's really good, and Squeegee does too. It's what I call whiteboarding. You whiteboard different things down for plot ideas for those different three areas that I've discussed with you on the question. And why do you do that? Because then you can have not just the overlying thing for the players, but you can even dig deeper into those ideas that go to that dramatic question. So say the first part of the dramatic question is, can the PCs use this scroll to close the gate? Maybe it's a gate to hell. But you can guide that a little more. Can they really understand the scroll? Can they decipher the language that scrolls in? Can the players get to where the scroll's hidden? Can they do the research? See, this is where the whiteboarding comes in to give you lots of ideas and steps to take the players along the path that builds the adventure around that dramatic question. Okay, so then the next part with the to do the thing. So say they've got to read the question or read the scroll. I'm sorry, read the question. God. Morning. Can they activate the scroll that closes that gate? Okay. Do they have the training? Do they have the level? Do they have the tools available? Are they at the right places? Do they know where those right places are? See, this is your story coming around this. And the story can evolve. It's a living document. So you're going to be constantly evolving this. I'm evolving. Right now, my Reign of Winter campaign, I am evolving left and right. With the new Ultimate Intrigue coming out, I am loving life. And I'm evolving it because I got one player who's going that way with it. And then there's two others who are following suit. So I'm thinking, wow, they can solve this with psychological warfare. They don't have to always just beat everything up. But it's psychological. They've got a combat portion of their party. They've got a psychological portion of their party. And I have to evolve my things to allow for both. And that's a great thing. And that's the great part about that. And then before the consequence. So maybe there's stages of the consequence. So before the demon lord comes through, well, maybe first he's got his army, his scouts that are going to come through. Or excuse me, the diabolical lord. So his scout devils come through. So maybe he's got a scout group that's going to come through first with a higher leader. And the players can diffuse that by taking care of him and yet still meet the dramatic question. So you don't have to make it absolute. You can do stages with it. And it makes it kind of fun because even if the players screw up, they can still get back on the tracks. And so keep that in mind as a GM. You really want to make it stageable for your players to really think about that, because a lot of these adventure paths, they got the written adventure paths for a lot of different gaming systems. You can evolve these to have more depth to them and more stages, and because it's going to make it more exciting when the players know that, geez, if they miss this one critical point, they're not done. The story's not game over. Maybe it's game more hard, or game going a weird direction, or game going off the rails, but it's still game. So you can evolve that whole dramatic question, and you can make a second set of dramatic questions if something go wrong. So keep that in mind by brainstorming and writing these things down for different parts of it. Then it allows you to evolve and be prepared for when your players do something that does try to shoot them off the rails. And so your job as a GM is always be prepared. It's kind of the Boy Scout motto, be prepared. And you are. You are constantly thinking in your mind, how do I get this if this occurs? And if you've got that kind of thinking going on, your players will never shock you in a way that you can't recover from as a GM. Keep that in mind. And so today on the dramatic question, again, let's go through it one more time to drill it through. And EvilSqueeGee, this is for you, my friend. And Zangmac, forgive me, Zangmac. I'm going through focusing on EvilSqueeGee. You're also a big part of that, and sitting in there and being the kind of color relief and humor relief as well for him. Can the PCs use the plot device to do the thing they have to do before some sort of a consequence or failure occurs? That's what the story comes together with. We all know this. We've been designing with this. But to codify it by having that in front of us makes it that much better when we're designing our campaigns. So go forth, have a great week of designing and really setting up the story dramatic question for your players. And that can be you can have an overall one, and you can have a week-to-week one as you get the next stage of the adventure that takes you to that overall dramatic question. So just keep that in mind. Thanks, and have a wonderful week. This is GM Tips Rick signing off.